Good morning, Woody Gooch. Welcome on VH Berries.
Good morning, Victor. Thank you for having me on here. It's a pleasure to be here.
According to some studies, up to 60% of adult human body is made from water, but I believe that with you this is different. This is 110%.
I think 111. It's I awfully spend a large amount of time in the water, and I'm usually oftenly dreaming about it if I'm not in it. It's a very special way to wake up and also end my day. So I'm forever in the ocean and forever thinking about it when I'm in it or not in it.
This is very inspiring, Woody, because you just mentioned that, for example, you just had a surfing session just before.
Yeah, that was my way to wake up. I was out in the water before the sun was actually over the horizon of the water. So it's quite common for me and my close friends to do that, especially in winter here. It's not too cold, but for the coastal Australian surfer, we find it quite cold. So we're up early and out there before most people are going to work. So that's sort of usually how we like to start our day if the conditions are aligning and we're all very enthusiastic.
And in Australia and New Zealand and Oceania in general, jellyfish are real there.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of ocean life, particularly just I think because of the water temperatures and I guess the cleanliness of our coastal ocean that we have. It's we have many of things that are dangerous in the water and also on the land, but in summertime, a couple of hours north of where I live here in Noosa, you usually have to swim in like a stinger suit. So that's realistically a wetsuit, but sort of head to toe, and a couple of more sort of covering spots of the body just to be able to cool yourself in summer in the ocean, because it's pretty much a fatal attack if you come in contact with one of these little jellyfish. They're called irukandjis.
Irukandjis.
Yeah, it's a very unusual name, but they've got this stealth sort of presence about them. They're very, very minute creatures, so you can't usually see them. And I think this is how obviously a lot of the attacks occur when they do. It's not like it's a creature that you can visually see when you're looking at the ocean or in the ocean. So it's quite scary when they approach. Not that I've had any contact with them, but I know a couple of my friends that have, and they said it's excruciating pain. It's like an elephant standing on your back.
And I'm mentioning, Woody Gooch, the sea and the environment surrounding you every day, because it plays a huge role in your work as a photographer. For example, one example is the natural light that you love to use.
Absolutely. I think the ocean has a mind of its own, and it works the way it wants to work. And I feel like a sense, being a surfer, you work with the ocean and you can't really, I guess, surf against it. And I think that's also come into play with how I photograph, also out of the ocean. That's also taught me how to sort of go with things naturally. And when things change, you go with change. And, it's usually in hands of something else, which is usually a way to learn quite fast. And I believe that that's also, been a very, very important backbone to my structure of how I work.
And in the structure on how you work, can you tell us about your journey starting from Noosa, Queensland?
So my family, my father and mother moved my brother and I up from Melbourne, which is a southern city in Australia, on the eastern side of Australia. And we moved up at a young age, and my parents were like, we've got to bring these two boys of ours up on the coast here, and let the elements almost be their curriculum. So we've been here for 23 years. No, yeah, I have been here for 23 years until I left. But yeah, we've been very close to the ocean, and in a sense, my parents have traveled quite a lot in my younger years with my brother, and we've always had the mountains, whether it's been in New Zealand or Japan or the ocean, at our fingertips. So we've always been, quite outdoorsy. A lot of our upbringing, and it's still obviously continuously is a daily experience for us to be in those elements. But I grew up here in Noosa. It's a very small town. I think the population's around 40,000 people. It's continuously kind of widened my horizon wherever I've thought, if I need to leave and I need to experience a lifestyle change, but then it's also brought me back in time and kind of reset my thinking and my overview of how I see the world and see the work and, and digest people's sort of, daily experiences. So Noosa's been a very nurturing, I say location. I'd say more of like a base. I look at it as home, but I see it as a base of it, how it just sort of resets my thinking, when times are especially like this. Noosa is a very special place to me still.
And with Noosa in the base, when you are using these images, places, when you come back to resources yourself and have some holidays. It reminds me, for example, in the adventure video games, when you come back to the basement.
Yeah, exactly. I think at the moment it almost feels like we're back at the basement. We're kind of under attack by the things that are happening in the world at the moment. So I guess, you could definitely classify that as a similar experience, but maybe just not as violent.
So in Noosa, there is, as you mentioned, 12 inhabitants and also a couple million pairs of sunglasses.
Yeah, well, the sun is always strong, even in winter. That's why I was also quite interested to see how burnt I was, even from this morning before we had this call. I was out surfing for 3 hours without any sunscreen on, and I was starting to look like a seagull.
And this is fascinating, Woody Gooch, because at school, when we are young, we are always learning that at the complete opposite of the planet, the seasons are reversed. Is it something that is true?
Of course. I mean, also growing up in Noosa, it's a warm climate. It's very climatized in a way that our winters are, you do not see the seasonal change like you would where you are in Montreal or where I was in Japan before this. So I think seasonal change, and also when I work, I'm often traveling quite often. So I'm experiencing a lot of seasonal change, but then coming back here and being back here for the last 2 years, it's quite unusual to experience, a temperature pattern very it doesn't drop too drastically, but that's a sign of our seasonal change. So I think being able to be based somewhere else and experience that seasonal change is I think it's a very important feeling. It also correlates with a lot of things in life, and I think it's one thing I've grown quite familiar with, and I feel like I do need that in my life, the seasonal changes and the experiences that they bring.
I would love to discuss, Woody Gooch, about your work and some of your current projects. So you are known for your photography in action world sports, and also through some projects into the wild and adventure.
Yeah, so I guess photography is my forefront of my creative process, and it has been for the last 10 years. It's I guess I'm more so known over my platforms as being a surf photographer, or being, I guess, addressed as an action photographer in a minimalistic and abstract visual experience. So that's been a process over the time, and obviously, like I was saying with seasonal change, I guess that comes into my personality and my workflow. So I've sort of developed over time a large body of work and a large avenue of interest in my work, and I've photographed large commercials. I've also worked on a lot of personal projects. I've just finished a big personal project with a close friend of mine, Quinn Matthews, who is also another really great photographer. So we executed a book over in Haiti on voodoo, on black magic. And we've also just finished my first short film that we also completed over in Haiti on voodoo and black magic. So it's been a very interesting experience, coming from a side where I know that freezing time is also, a very important statement, but also working with, moving images and having a narrative behind that is also, I find very stimulating with how I see my work today.
Tell me about the episode of Woody Gooch going into Haiti to cover the voodoo religion, because you did 3 trips over 4 years.
Yeah, so 3 trips. The first trip, we were shockingly naive, knowing what we really didn't know what was setting ourselves up for. So our first trip, it stemmed from a trip before this in Nepal. Quinn, that I mentioned before, my brother Ben, we were usually coming to an agreement that once a year we have to sort of orchestrate a trip within a third world country and bring a book out of it or a photo essay. And obviously Haiti was the next one on the tip of the tongue. So we ended up going to Haiti for our first or our second trip after the first one, and we were there. We flew in our classic style of how we like to work and travel is, living in a very spontaneous sort of headspace. So we arrived, had this hotel. We ended up getting to this hotel, which is an hour away from the airport, and it was a voodoo hotel, which was, I think, a friend of a friend that had been to Haiti had been here and thought it was a bit of a hilarious situation to put us in. So we ended up at this quite scary hotel for a week. So we literally just put our bags down and we were just wandering around the street to see what we could kind of intertwine ourselves with. And a couple of days forward, we were walking down the street and we had these 2 young local Haitian guys zoom past on a couple of dirt bikes, and they did a U-turn and drove back towards us. And I thought, oh God, now we've really this is really sinking in that we're in Haiti and anything could happen, 2, 3 quite vulnerable younger guys walking around with a lot of camera gear on our shoulders was probably not the wisest decision that I thought after sort of experiencing these guys sort of turn around and come up towards us. And we kicked it off with these guys, and they asked us if we enjoyed, hip hop and rap music. So we all looked at each other and said, sure. Where can this take us if we say yes? So we obviously all agreed that we like hip hop and rap music. So these guys pretty much took us under their wing and told us to come stop by their studio, which pretty much developed a very quick friendship with these guys. And obviously they had a larger group of friends that obviously were quite enthusiastic to hear about our background and why we're here in Haiti and what our sort of reason was to come here and be walking on the streets with all this camera gear. So we ended up, getting on with these guys, and they ended up sort of having this idea that they hadn't shot this music video that they intended to do a week before we came. So they thought, now's the time, we've got these guys here, let's shoot a music video. So we ended up shooting this, music video with a very small handy cam and very minimal gear. Because, at the time we weren't really prepared to shoot a music video in Haiti. So we ended up doing this. We ended up in some really quite, I guess, intense situations. I guess the neighborhoods that they live in and work in are quite violent and quite unpredictable. So over time, I guess we gained that confidence and that comfortability of being with these guys. So they ended up being like, after a week of being with them every day for 12 hours a day, quite close friends. So after a week, we left and we thought, wow, that was, almost too good to be true. Maybe we should go back. So, 6 months, fast forward, we got a message from one of these younger guys that were working on this music video within Haiti and said, hey, we're having a show at this place. You guys should come back. And I thought, oh, maybe we should. So, before we completely agreed on flying back, Quinn and I came to the decision that we need to shoot something with a bit more of a structure behind it. So I thought, what is the backbone of Haiti? Country and culture always has a predominantly obvious backbone to how things work and what people rely on and what keeps people, creatively and mentally sort of stable. And obviously Haiti, obviously it's an island in the Caribbean, and most of these islands favor religion, and they all vary from, Christianity to the other opposite side of that to black magic and voodoo and superstition. So we thought, hey, let's go back and possibly see what we can get ourselves into on our second trip, which obviously stemmed into many fingers, and it was quite erratic with where we ended up, and I guess the help that we ended up gathering before we went there. We ended up meeting a local fixer that had worked with a lot of prestigious photographers in the past with Magnum Photo Agency. So we thought, okay, this guy's quite confident, and I think we could definitely achieve something that we didn't the trip beforehand. So we took this guy on, and we pretty much elaborated where we would like to take this project, and possibly even achieve a lot more than what we had initially sort of told him. So obviously saying that it obviously exploded with all these ideas that we had, and this guy was like, what, we can do absolutely everything that you've addressed here. Just give me a little bit of time. So yeah, it kind of just steamrolled from there. And after that second trip, it went surprisingly really, really well. And I came back to Australia after that second trip, and I called Quinn up, a couple months, 6 months after the trip, and I said, hey, let's go back and let's go shoot a short film on this, because I think this is very, very, very unique and very special. And there's a very a strong sort of pure essence to this religion that sort of holds this country together in a way. So we went back for our third trip, and that's where we started, and also where I shot my first short film.
You mean, Woody Gooch, that after the third trip, Haiti was home for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was starting to feel like that until we had a couple of hairy situations really click in. The day that we landed on our third and final trip was Haiti had just pretty much gone into I guess a lockdown of a political unrest. There was a coup that had just formed the day we landed. So obviously this was news to us the morning that we landed. Our local fixer had addressed this to us as we walked out of the departure gates and said, you're in a hell of a ride for this week. And so I think that really put it into perspective of how these countries are also still very have a lot of unease still, and there's a lot of hurt, and I think there's a lot of things happening within the country that I think need to be shown in a way that we can't be oblivious to this for too much longer. And yeah, I mean, Haiti has a very special place in my heart now, from creating the friends that I have and seeing the way that the country's in, there's a lot of things that I think should be addressed, and I think it would, it would take a fair bit of time, but I think, we're on a bit of an avenue that I want to keep sort of developing and expressing the way that I see Haiti.
This is very impressive because when you are approaching with the person that was with you, this diasporic religion founded between the 16th and 19th century, the first contact is very important, and as you mentioned, you got some relation with some fixers who helped you to set the first contact. So can you tell me about how you got the first connection?
Well, yeah, our first predominantly more of a footing in the door of reaching these more tricky environments was our fixer Reggie, and we found him, or Quinn actually, my partner that I was doing the project with. He found him on Instagram. I think he had about 70 followers, and we reached out to him via Instagram. I didn't hear from him for a month or two. I don't know. He ended up getting in contact with us about 3 months later after we messaged him on Instagram and said, "Hey, this is my WhatsApp. I'm a little more reliable on here. Give me a message and we can see what we can do." So we ended up messaging him, and obviously his classic phrase was, like, if I haven't replied, my phone's, gone for a swim in the water or something, because they get a lot of hurricanes. So the guy, I think Reggie went through like 3-4 phones in the time that we got to Haiti. And this guy he was classic. He obviously ran on his own schedule. He always had his 4-5-year-old son, Chris, around his shoulder wherever we went, he pretty much, he had a very, he had a personality that was just as scary as some of the places we went to, but then there was this harmonious feel when he would this presence that he had was also like a very caring father that we'd had look after us for a very long time as well. So in these situations, we trusted him, but there was lots of times where he left us in some really hairy situations, which were quite tricky to sort of deal with. But yeah, it was a very interesting journey with Reggie.
Woody Gooch, in this very specific short film, I assume that you are showing their culture and traditions. What have you learned from these experiences?
I mean, it's a very complex religion, within the community as well. And also being, I guess, an outsider is quite hard to comment on. I guess the overall, the body of what voodoo and the black magic sort of experience evokes. But from what I saw and the community that I was involved in, was very powerful. Obviously, a religion handles people in a way that gives them a lot of, positivity, a lot of strength, a lot of clarity, and a lot of, enthusiasm and structure to life. And I think being involved in a place that was, extremely unfamiliar, and also the culture and the religion as well being quite unfamiliar to me was a very interesting, learning experience. It's very, very abstract. I think the film in itself quite, explains exactly how a lot of people seem to not have much of a choice in Haiti to decide whether they want to be more so focused on voodoo or Christianity. And the film really sort of expresses our abstract experience in a very culturally correct point of view as well.
You know what? You should definitely do a fourth trip to do a premiere night session to show them the short film.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a conversation of ours. If a fourth trip is in the works, but I think that I'm also just very grateful that our third trip was when we did it, because it would have been something that I would have thought about day in, day out whilst being locked down here in Australia and not being able to get over there and create what we just did. So possibly a fourth trip. I think it would be very important to come back to the community and show them what they were all a part of, because I think they were very unaware of how broad we went with the film and how beautiful the film is as well. So I think that could be another little adventure back over to Haiti to do.
And Woody Gooch, if one day you plan to do this fourth trip, you are definitely going to use a very special car to get to the airport. And I am talking about the Audi e-tron Sportback.
Oh, I don't know if I'll be able to take that over there, but the last car that we actually had take us to the airport was pretty much 4 inches off the ground. It took about half an hour to start. So, I mean, I ideally I would love that, but I don't even know if I think that would be a good idea. I think it'd probably it'd give too many people of an interest of who's in the car than anything else.
That was my transition, because you made a video, a commercial that combines your personality, Woody Gooch, and also the characteristic of a product, for example.
Yeah, that was a really cool experience, and also project that we all got to work on. That was after returning from Japan. I'd come back as COVID had started, and obviously coming back meant that life for me kicked back into gear in a way that the having less was quite more, and also living a little bit more sustainably and working in that environment, in that headspace, was something that I hadn't had in a long time. So at the right time, in the right place, Audi came to me with an overall idea and a creative sort of pitch to what they were thinking for their next sort of the video project. So we they involved me for this is my first time being I guess the focus or the subject of a project. So it was quite special to go through that entire procedure of expressing a lot more than just, I guess, what I've done. It's more about what I do and how I do it and what I see for the foreseeable future.
And it's also very special because the car was traveling on the same roads that you used to ride forever, because you are definitely someone who is very attached to the east coast of Australia instead of the west coast. I know there is some rivalry.
Yeah, absolutely. That was that this road trip is quite precise. It was very fixated on where I would like to go and who I'd like to see along the way, and how these people do these things in a very particular way that's very nourishing, fulfilling, and also quite minimal in a sense of how I see the world and how I like to do things. So we started 2 hours north of Noosa, where I am here at the moment, and the trip was initially meant to finish down in Melbourne, but obviously with lockdown and borders closing, that was a bit too tricky at the time. However, we ended up rearranging the route, and we took majority of the way we went the road that I was familiar with in the coastline. And then we took the extra leg around the back of the cities, and we ventured out into the mountains, which is another place of interest of mine, and it's quite a common experience for me to be in the mountains. So we went around the mountains, and we went to a beautiful farm, which pretty much ended the trip, which is where I wanted to be. There was this old beautiful 700-acre farm, and we ended up closing the last few shots there, where I was getting out of a car and transitioning onto a horse, which is probably a little bit more sustainable. But it was a really beautiful trip. The video's, one of the most amazing projects I've been a part of.
In definitive, we can say that you started your career by 24 frame per day to 24 frame per second.
Yeah, you could say that. That's another good analogy of exactly where I am now.
And through this transition to filmmaking, is it something that really burns you and motivates you for the future?
Absolutely. I think filmmaking and documenting photographically are two very different things, but they also have a purpose and a meaning behind them. And I think in a sense that they're just as equally as important as each other, but they have two very different parallels to how they work and how the creatives work. And for me, working with a creative team, working on a photo shoot to a creative team on a video project is extremely different. And I think that the differences in the two are creating a very important balance with how I guess see and document and structure both of these these important balances in my career. So filmmaking for me now is something that I'm slowly transitioning, not completely into that's all I would like to do, and I can only see myself doing that. But I think pausing a little bit on more so with my photography, like I started exhibiting work in galleries, and prior to doing this, for me, I thought, shooting a nice photo here and there and multiple locations could tie into something that, makes a body of work and tells a story, which it can. But for me, at the moment, before I go out and photograph things, there has to be a purpose and a meaning now, and that also tells people a story, and also tells myself a story, to be able to express in a very clear and direct way. So I believe that filmmaking now for me is a sort of a guidance of being able to structure things in a more meaningful sense of having to be quite thought out and planned and organized. So in that way, I think it's it's a very positive sort of experience for me at the moment, and it's only it's a lifestyle that I feel like I'm adapting to quite fast. So yeah, it's I can't find any reason to not have any more interest and just keep pursuing my dreams and seeing where I guess filmmaking can kind of carve a path for my eye and my vision and my narrative to the world.
And through these multiples projects, Woody Gooch, how tired are you each night before going to sleep?
Oh, the thing is, like, I'm never tired. I think it's my friends and the people that I'm around. I exhaust, and I think they're the ones that take on my tiredness and my enthusiasm, because I'm consistently and constantly thinking of things that I could be doing or I should be doing So yeah, I think that'll be with me forever.
I knew it. You are going to switch from 111% of water to 112% of fire.
Yeah, well, you need a bit of water to put out the fire, so I think they both need to be together.
Woody Gooch, thank you so much for your time. I'm wishing you the best.
Thank you so much, Victor. Thank you for having me. It was a really nice time to catch up and also express and hear myself of what I've been up to in the last couple of years. So thank you.